The previous basket is under review.
Welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast, the flagship podcast of the new website, Basket Under Review. It's right there in the title. And we are here today with a writer for the website, Will Warren, who I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think it'd be backed up by many people in the space, is one of the best and most insightful college basketball writers going these days. Super smart guy, very clued into analytics and studying hoops. His most recent piece is a great example of this, understanding trends behind the sport. And Will, thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Great. It's only downhill from here, man. That's too nice of an intro. They're going to think I'm some sort of smart guy. I mean,
you are.
You don't want to know the GPAs I've had in my life.
GPA is an unreliable indicator, trust me.
Exactly. That's a fake stat.
Yeah, very fake stat. It's very noisy. But listen, like Will is a fantastic, like on Substack, his previous site, Stats by Will at Substack, was, I would say, my most reliable read for most of college basketball season. And this is coming from someone who writes a lot about college basketball, right? I just think Will is super clued in, and if people are not familiar with his work, hopefully you will be now. And I'm super happy to have him on the podcast, and super happy to be working with him much more closely. We've actually met for the first time at the Final Four this year. We went to a tremendous hole-in-the-wall taco bar in San Antonio, which people talk up San Antonio food. I thought it was extremely good. They served one kind of taco, and it was excellent.
Yeah, that place ruled. We won't go into detail. That was the place where I saw your life flash before your eyes in slow motion as you tried to recall where your phone was.
Yes, I thought I lost my phone.
I felt for you. I've been there myself.
Yeah, it was, I thought I lost my phone. I thought I lost my computer. I thought I lost everything. But it was all just in my bag. It's fine. Anyway, okay, let's get into it. So your first piece for Basket Under Review was about what you called the Rule of Four. What is the Rule of Four? Explain it to us. What's the thought process there?
Well, there's a lot of, ideas I run throughout the year. Some of them really dumb and some of them not so dumb. And I'm not really sure where this falls on the spectrum. But many, many years ago, many months ago, I was on a family vacation. And I started to realize, this is when I was, I guess, 18 or 19, something like that. Not when I knew the whole world yet, like I do now at the ripe age of almost 32. That around day 4, there is going to be at least one argument, disagreement, or what I call a certified event, trademark, that derails the vacation temporarily, if not permanently. And so my theory was, can I apply this to other things? Because I see the stats about, hiring and firing across all sports. I mean, college football's coaching tenure right now averages 3.7 years. And that's dropping every single season. NBA is 3.97, and that it's only going to drop even further the more free agency controls it. NHL 2.28. European football, you really got to tip the cap to the Europeans. Average tenure of 1.39 years for a head coach. 46 Scaramucci's, if you're curious. In college basketball, it really ranges more than it does in almost any other sport because of the diversity of conferences. So Mountain West, just 2.1 per coach, because you see a lot of movement up and out of that conference. As Utah State sort of is the flagship, but we've seen a lot at other schools there too, to 4.9 in the America East. And so my thought was trying to figure out, to prove my hypothesis that what you have by the end of year 4. We've seen this in college football. We've seen this in many other sports, and nothing came back stronger than one specific metric, which was, did your coach beat their program rank at KenPom at least once by the end of year 4? If they did, you at least had a pretty good shot of having a guy who's going to be successful long term. If they didn't, it was probably time to pull the plug. So, some examples of that would have been Mike Woodson didn't do it in 4 years. Mark Fox, poor Mark Fox, man, didn't do it at Cal.
Leave Mark Fox out of this.
Yes. Travis Steele at Xavier. Archie Miller at Indiana. Archie Miller at Rhode Island, by the way, too, is about to qualify for this. Pat Ewing at Georgetown. Lots of different examples like that where when you look through this list, if you, and it's in our article here at Basket Under Review, the best coach on the board over the hiring cycles I surveyed is Jeff Capel or maybe Porter Moser. Like, I'm not really sure. Maybe Fred Hoiberg. Like, and if that's the best you can get out of the 0 for 4 guys, that's like your outlier cases, it's probably best to not give that guy a year 5. And I found this interesting because, as we'll get into, we've got some really intriguing names that I've pointed out in here coming up on their 4th year after being hired in spring 2022.
Yeah, so that's an interesting sample size too, is spring 2022. I do want to eventually get into the topic of North Carolina on this podcast, but before we do that, what are the names that stick out to you as the most interesting guys who are on that wavelength right now of, it could go either way?
There's a couple that are going to be really obvious, like Matt McMahon at LSU, I think is a really easy case of, I mean, the 3 years so far, best finish is 88th, which I know LSU basketball is not something we hold up as like the gold standard of SEC hoops, but they have 10 top 50 finishes in the last 30 years. They've made a Final Four in our lifetimes. They're not a bad basketball school. That's one. I think the other that will come to mind pretty quickly is Thad Matta at Butler. It's not been awful, I wouldn't say. I don't think anybody would say it's been truly terrible, but he's 0 for 3 in beating Butler's program rank, and the best season so far, 61st, would have been their 3rd worst from 06 to 2018. So those are a couple of obvious names, but there's some others that pop up on here that I really haven't seen on hot seat lists yet, like Mike Schwartz at East Carolina. Hasn't beat their numbers yet, and people might not realize it, but Mike Schwartz has had some pretty good players like Javon Small, Ezra Assar, Bobby Pettiford have all played for ECU under his tenure. Jonas Hayes at Georgia State, that was a really popular hire when that came out. Archie at Rhode Island. I just saw somebody, and amazingly a true thing, gassing up the San Diego Toreros this year on Twitter.com or X, whatever they call it now. The Everything app. Steve Lavin, San Diego, not come close to beating their program rank so far. So you've got some guys on there who are obvious, and then you've got some I just haven't seen much buzz about. And, you know, in some ways, these are not schools that catch a lot of headlines, but like you would think that Archie entering year 4 at Rhode Island, which is a school that has had reasonable success in the last 20 years. I mean, they've made a round of 32 at least. You would think some of these guys would get a little more buzz in that way.
No, I think there's a conversation to be had about Archie. Because he was obviously really good at Dayton. He was like the hot coaching hire when he got hired in Indiana. He was like the guy. When he got hired in Indiana, it was like no brainer, great hire, good job, everyone, good process, well done. And then it just didn't work. I mean, he recruited really well, and he set Mike Woodson up for his first 2 years of success by getting Trace Jackson Davis and keeping him around. And Mike Woodson built on that because, you know, I think Trace Jackson Davis is probably destined to go down as an underrated great Indiana basketball player. Like, he had a great 4-year career there, was a tremendous player, particularly in his last 2 years, and none of what Mike Woodson did in his first 2 years would have worked without Trace Jackson Davis. But it doesn't work out with Archie. Get rid of him. He goes to Rhode Island. And I kind of thought, like, okay, he's going back to the A-10. You've seen guys have an issue with Indiana sometimes, like not to say the bright lights, but just a little bit of pressure and kind of discomfort with the whole, like, you have to be a politician to be in that job, basically. And I figured, okay, he'll go back to Rhode Island. This is a good job. Took a year off or 2 years, whatever it was. And it just hasn't happened. And now this is another kind of corollary to your piece, is like, who is a good coach and who is in a good program that just routinely churns out good coaches? Because you look at what Dayton's done since then, and I think Anthony Grant's a really good coach, but I have a hard time with Utah State because I think they keep hiring good coaches, but I think they're also like uniquely set up for success in a weird way, even though their administration sort of seems to be a mess here and there. They just keep churning out good basketball teams and good coaches. So how do you gauge that when you're looking at this stuff?
Well, I think there's some of this, like you mentioned, where you can weigh like the median of the program, or perhaps not as much the average rank as much as postseason results matter for me a bit. Hubert getting a 1 seed his third year does matter for me a little bit in judging that tenure. Like, he's still 0 for 4 in beating their program rank, as a true binary thing. But I would still say that generally speaking, it's not been that bad. He's had a couple of really successful seasons. I do mention in the piece that I think the worst thing that could have happened to him was making the national title game his first year. And it's no fault of his own. You'd rather make it than not.
Yeah. What do you say? Lose in the first round instead?
Yeah, but it also just kind of sets you up for failure a little bit going forward. Of you overachieve so greatly your first time out that people sort of perhaps overestimate maybe just how much of a program elevator you are. But I try and weigh that a bit. And there are some cases in here of coaches who are currently 0 for 3 from that spring 2022 class that I think are pretty darn good, like Chris Caputo at George Washington. He's 0 for 3, but they're on the rise. They came pretty close last year, and they bring back a pretty strong roster this year. Ryan, I believe it's Pitino or Padon. I've never bothered to learn. At Illinois State, like they've gone 289th, 179th, 132nd for a program just inside the top 125. That's a really good trend. Like, they're possibly going to be Valley favorites this year. I think there are cases where if you just look at that data straight up, you can say, oh, he's 0 for 3. He's probably on the hot seat. But also, no. But in the same sense, it's had such a good hit rate that, it sort of stuns me to look at this and be like, wow, Billy Lane is still at St. Joe's for some reason. Or like Jerry Stackhouse. Yeah, Jerry Stackhouse got 5 years. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where, like, had they been fired after 4 years, and this is not a thing where I'm rooting for people to lose their jobs by any means. It's just sort of an objective analysis.
Right.
There really would not have been a significant downside to just letting those guys go and, spinning the wheel once more.
Let's get into the rosters as promised at the top that we think are super interesting or bad or just kind of in the middle, not sure about. And you mentioned Hubert. This is a program I led my piece with a month ago when I wrote about them. I just kind of thought like, yeah, they had a decent offseason, like it's fine, whatever. And then the local North Carolina folks, I think it was, let me look up who it is actually. Greg Barnes from Inside Carolina, reported they surpassed the 14 million mark in their financial commitment to the 2025-26 roster, approximately triple what was spent last season, which, fair enough, there's a lot of rosters out there that are like acknowledged, like we're in the 10, $12 million range. I say a lot. There's 20, probably 15, 20 schools that are paying that much money for college basketball players right now. But getting into the 14 million mark and looking at this Carolina roster, you're just kind of like, wait a second. And this is the thing that I ultimately, as I was writing this piece, again, like a month ago, was looking at and thinking, if I'm a booster, next year, a student paying an athletics fee to pay for the revenue share, whatever, I kind of want a little bit more visibility into where this money's going, because I look at this North Carolina roster, and there's other rosters we're going to talk about, and I don't know where the money's going. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't. Where are you spending all this money that, like, do you just max out your budget anyway? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
yeah,
give me your thoughts when you look at North Carolina specifically. And then we can get into other rosters, but where, why, how, where'd the money go?
The money aspect is really interesting to me because, I mean, if you want to, you can say, well, Caleb Wilson probably costs quite a bit.
For sure.
And
how much?
Maybe keeping Seth Trimble costs a good amount or whatever, or Vasar. But it does remind me a little bit of, teams don't do this as much anymore, but when the NHL first introduced their salary cap, and you would see the Florida Panthers have to give out like gigantic deals to objectively like middling players. And it was just to get to the floor. And I was like, did North Carolina accidentally do that? Where they're just like, they're trying to get to 24th best? I don't love it because, like you said, so in my head, if it's a $14 million roster, frankly, you should have gotten Darian Williams
That's what I'm
with your
saying.
money.
Where's
NC
Darian
State
Williams?
got him from you.
Where's JT Toppin? Who's the kid who signed for Kansas State from Memphis?
Oh, PJ Haggerty.
Yeah, where's Haggerty? Like all these guys.
Well, and it's not like a bad roster, I would say. I don't think this is a bad group. I think, like, defensively, they're huge. They're going to be really long. They can switch really well. I think that they're going to be able to run on one side of the ball what Hubert really likes. And it will solve a major issue they had last year, which was that they were not very good on the boards. This kind of feels like, to me, when you spend way too much money to correct a mistake. Like, if you somehow bought concert tickets, but it's in New Jersey and you live, say, in Washington, D.C., I'm not saying you specifically. This is actually something
I've never done that.
That has happened to someone in my life where they just did not check the dates. It kind of feels like that, where it's like, oh, we made a huge mistake last year. We really should have been better. I mean, like, not that UNC should have been amazing last year, but they had the talent to be a 6 seed or so. Like, they should have been a little better. But the problem is, I feel like they might have just spent $14 million to be a 6 seed.
Yeah.
And you don't look at this roster and see, like, mega plus shooters. I mean, like, Kyan Evans is quite good, but Kyan Evans divorced from the Medved motion, I'm not totally sure I'm sold on. Jonathan Powell is really fun for West Virginia, but Jonathan Powell divorced from the DeVries system, I'm not totally sure I'm sold on. So they have a lot of questions, and what this leads me to believe is you might be spending $14 million for some of your close games to just be Caleb Wilson Cook, Caleb Wilson Savis, or, God forbid, like Jaren Stevenson, go get us 14 rebounds, which is not an impossible thing. But like you're saying, I don't want these teams to be holistically, ruthlessly moneyballing rosters the way that, like, some aspects of professional hoops has become, because I like that mistakes can be made. But at the same time, I really, if I'm a UNC booster, if I'm a UNC fan, I would like for this roster to at least be a guaranteed, I don't know, man, like top 8 in the nation, top 7, if we're spending $14 million.
That's the thing. You see, like, Texas Tech's roster, Texas A&M, and if I'm a Carolina booster, and this is not on camera, we'll eventually put this stuff on camera and get on YouTube and all that stuff, but we're, frankly, my background is not ready for that yet. I got to set up a fake bookshelf behind me that's like an AI bookshelf with a bunch of books and pennants and stuff on it before we do that. Right now it's just my guest room.
You can see all my running medals here.
There it is. There we go. But point being, like, if I'm a Carolina booster wearing this color shirt, wondering, like, hey, I donated $5 million to the program last year, or $500,000, or whatever it might be, to the NIL collective. And I'm looking at this roster, how well we're spending that money. And that brings me to Indiana, which I think is another program that has a huge NIL fund, has been very aggressive in terms of NIL. And under Mike Woodson, you could see where the money was being spent, even if it wasn't spent well or wisely. It was being spent on big name players that were like, oh, wow, these guys are big transfer portal gets. But they didn't fit together, right? You could look at the roster and be like, like, how is Oumar Ballo going to play with Malik Renew? I'm not really sure, but that's 2 big guys who are good at basketball, so okay, whatever. Put a bunch of guards around them who can't shoot threes, sure. But the big theme that I keep coming back to is the lack of transparency in how money's being spent. You look at this Indiana roster, and knowing that they have about $10 million on NIL on this roster, and you do kind of wonder where it's going, because I thought, looking at the roster in the spring, oh, okay, like, this is an interesting, like, these guys fit. Like, this is smart. Darian DeVries is not a dumb guy. Like, he recruits to his system and he knows what he wants, and he's getting guys who fit his system. But I did think there was, like, one more shoe to drop as the offseason went on that there would be like one more big money guy. And particularly since Luke Goody has been ruled ineligible and there's another scholarship left, you sort of look at this roster and think, this is a $10 million roster? Like, how do you apportion this out?
Yeah, and especially considering one of the players, and arguably I would say the best player on the team is the coach's son.
Oh,
which
for sure.
Is, like, probably, I am well aware he will get like plenty of dollars to advertise, whatever it may be. But I don't exactly believe it was hard to sway Tucker DeVries to Indiana's roster. Now, like Lamar Wilkerson, Taden Connerway, etc., maybe Sam Alexis even, those guys might have taken a little bit more. Like, maybe I
think Wilkerson had big offers, to be fair.
Yeah, like he was probably a $3 million guy in himself.
Yeah.
And so you take that into account, and we're probably going to say Reed Bailey was quiet, well chased. I wouldn't say he was on the level of Darian Williams or anything, but people wanted a Reed Bailey. They wanted Connerway. They wanted Wilkerson. So you can squint and be like, okay, if we add all of this up, it gets there. But the problem is, if we add all of this up, are we sure that the value matches what we're paying for? It's a little bit of wins above replacement theory. And it kind of takes me back to, and this is only because I live here, as I think most people are aware, Tennessee's roster last year, I never got the exact figure on it, but I was told it cost around $5 million. And so you think about what was on that roster, where it's Zakai Ziegler, Chaz Lanier, Jemai Meshack, Kakpara, for $5 million, and objectively that roster is quite a bit better than what Indiana's putting out in night one. Now, is this roster super old? Is it probably going to be like solid? Yeah, it'll be fine. Like, they've got a bunch of good shooters on it, but it does kind of feel like if you're an Indiana fan and this is your first real shot with this new coach and you've kind of gone through year after year of unfulfilled promises, does it feel like you kind of paid $10 million for, mid-major all-stars in a way, but not really mid-major all-stars?
Yeah.
You kind of got 3/5 of them.
It feels like you paid $10 million to be slightly better West Virginia without Javon Small, basically.
And right now at Torvik, Indiana's 42nd. And right. I kind of feel like that's a lot of money to be 42nd.
Right. And this is the thing about the Woodson era. Again, like I said, is on the numbers side, or the preseason, throw these guys in the roster, make the model out of them, whatever, they were usually top 20. And then the season would start and they'd be bad because the roster didn't fit together and Mike Woodson's not a very good basketball coach. But you could see where the money was going. You could understand why people were purchased for the prices they were purchased at. Even as they were being purchased, you could be like, this guy can't shoot, this guy can't shoot, this guy doesn't space the floor. Why are you doing this? You have one guy, and he played at Illinois last year, who is your only shooter. Why do you only have one guy who can shoot? Again, I think Darian DeVries, really good coach. Like, really good college basketball coach, and I think it will be fine eventually. I'm confused about the roster composition, given the money spent, which is my big theme here. I follow the NBA. I take for granted, I think, particularly when we get to the offseason and I follow the NBA through the offseason, and it's just like, oh yeah, this guy signed for $14 million. This guy signed he's 2 years, $65 million, whatever. And you have a clear picture of what everyone costs, what the market is, what the players around that guy could be worth 2 years down the line, whatever. And in college basketball right now, it's so weird because I like NIL. As I've written many, many times, I think it's such a boon for the sport. It's been great. But the lack of visibility into what specific guys are getting, you talk to people and they kind of, they tell you a little bit like, oh yeah, I think this guy's getting, or a player will tell you when you're interviewing, like, oh yeah, that guy, I heard he's getting $100K, like whatever. And it's completely opaque. And maybe that will change as revenue sharing comes in. But this is like to me anyway, the really interesting next step for college basketball is understanding allocation and roster makeup and how schools are handling this. Because I think, you can be North Carolina and, oh yeah, we upped our NIL to $14 million this year, and you look at the roster, it's like, wait, how did you do this?
Now, one small pushback here. I will say, if Indiana is like a top 20 team this year, $10 million is worth it.
Oh, of course.
Especially in year one, like if you would overachieve and, like
and they
Dorn
may,
is really, yeah.
I think DeVries is a good enough coach that they could absolutely do that, and I could be completely wrong.
And I do hope that basketball doesn't, like college hoops doesn't get to the same like asset brained side of like the NBA where like I love Bill Simmons and I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I was listening to his pod on a run maybe last week and he was criticizing the Pistons for giving Duncan Robinson, I know it's a lot of money, $48 million for 3 years, but he's like, why didn't they give it to Sam Hauser? Well, okay, they had to give it to somebody because Malik Beasley is in $500 million of gambling debt or whatever. I'm sorry they couldn't think super fast about that, but they had to do something. So I think, it is, some of this is just like what was left on the board and how soon they could get it. But I do agree, having a more centralized understanding of, how much certain players are worth, how much they're actually getting paid, and not just the under the table deals they're getting too.
Right.
From like local restaurateurs or whatever it may be.
Which is what it was supposed to be in the first place, by the way.
Yeah.
Which I don't even care that it's not, but it's so funny that like 6 years ago, it was like, oh, these guys can do like Fortnite sponsorships. Isn't that cool? Like they can get, $20K from a Fortnite like stream or whatever. And now it's just like, we will pay you $4 million to play basketball for our
AJ
school.
Devanza, we will pay you $5 million to do a TikTok with the Mormon moms.
Please go to one service at the Church of Latter-day Saints and you're good.
Elliot, so do they still do the super cool pregame thing with the sheets and they drop them?
At BYU? I have no idea.
It was so cool when Shimmer was there. So hopefully he gets that.
Yeah.
That's what the $5 million is for, I think.
Let's hope so. All right. We've talked about Carolina. We've talked about Indiana. Let's go to BYU, which we just talked about. They're going to be good. But I do like BYU-wise. I feel like this is just like the rare case of an NBA assistant coming back and being really good at recreating what is actually. Like, if you look at the vast majority of guys who have come down from the NBA and been college coaches. Maybe this is another prompt for a piece, by the way. But
the ones that work.
My vibe, unsupported by evidence, is that it typically doesn't work super well, right? But Kevin Young came in right away, recruited well, retained well, ran great stuff all year. They were, a 3 seed last year at BYU?
6, but they were
6 seed. Very good team. Dangerous team coming into the tournament. And now they have AJ Devanza, and they have Richie Saunders.
Yeah, and Richie Saunders too.
Like, who was the best player on the team last year? Like, forget, Igor Demon. Saunders was the best player on the team and might be the best player on the team again. I just think BYU is like West Coast Alabama in a little bit. Already after year one, super impressively in a groove of like, I think these guys are going to be good, like kind of every year.
Yeah, man, I love their roster. I love what they've done. Offensively, I think you can make a real argument they're going to be top 4, top 3 in the sport. I would be a little surprised if they're outside the top 10 at year's end. And so I look at them, and I'm with you. I think because Robert Wright, if my memory serves, was between $3 and $4 million is what the public offer was, supposedly.
Yeah.
And then Devanza, 5. Saunders probably got a good bit to say, so did Baker. But the point to me is, like, they're spending their money correctly. And, like, they're spending their money, the big money swings are on the big guys, as it should be. And then, they're bringing back the role guys. They've got, like, good little pieces here and there that I really like. You can probably go, like, 8 or 9 deep on this roster and just be like, oh, I like that guy. I like that guy. I think that guy fits. The beauty of it is it doesn't have to be the Devanza show if they don't want it to be. They can spread it out. They can kind of let him go on and off ball. They can run all sorts of screens and such for him. Saunders can cook for a while. I want to call him Bobby Wright. It just feels good for him. Bobby Wright, I like him quite a bit. It's a fun roster, man. They've got the goods. I'm not convinced of his defensive styles yet, but at the same time, I wasn't convinced of that at all last year, and it felt like they turned it up as the season went on. They kind of figured it out. They figured out what worked, and part of like maybe this is the wrong way to look at it, but I do kind of wonder if that's a little bit of the NBA mindset of like you spend the first half largely figuring things out. The second half of the season, you're well aware of what works for you, what doesn't, and then you really hammer those things in. And I loved the way they played the final 2 months of the year. Yeah. So that's a roster I'm complimentary of. That's a system I really like. I would suggest to the wide array of people out there who are perhaps like team agnostic, or I don't know, maybe your team is like really in the dirt or in the hole, I would say. You could do a lot worse than just watching a lot of BYU basketball this year.
Yeah. They were fantastically fun last year, and they're going to be the same fundamentally with the number 1 pick this year. So it's going to be fun. Okay, next roster, St. John's. So here's my take on St. John's. I think Rick Pitino reacted so poorly to losing to Arkansas, old nemesis, and John Calipari. I think it affected him emotionally to the point where he has swerved somewhat dramatically, where he built last year's team to be completely defensively oriented. I don't care if you can shoot. If you're a guard, just guard, right? If you guard, and that defense last year, people forget because they lost. It was a buzzsaw. Like, It was a classic Pitino, like peak Louisville era Rick Pitino defensive buzzsaw. So good. And it was fun to watch, and he was doing the old school thing. One of the fun things about covering Rick Pitino basketball teams is sitting courtside and watching him talk to them. Not even talk. He'll just stamp his foot down, and they will blitz the ball handler. Like, it's so clued in, particularly come tournament time. They're like locked in. Oh, okay, blah, and then go. And that was what St. John's was last year, but they could not shoot. And it turns out shooting, particularly from the perimeter, is a helpful skill. So I think after last year's experience of RJ Luis and Kadari Richmond driving fruitlessly to the rim against really tall, athletic, talented Arkansas players who only figured it out like in the second half of the season, has decided I need shooters. And I think in the transfer portal, he's basically gotten them. I don't know if this defense is going to be as good as it was, but what do you think about this? Like, I think they're maybe a little bit more multidimensional than they were, even if they're not going to be like vintage Pitino.
I think they're certainly going to be more multidimensional. I don't expect them to be nearly as good on the boards this year. Yeah. And I think they're going to take a serious step back there. I would be really surprised if the defense is nearly as good as it was. And I know that is such a foolish thing to say about a Rick Pitino coach team. That man can turn anything into a good defense, no matter what you give him. There are aspects of this where I think, okay, I get it. Like Ian Jackson, Isaiah Sellers, 2 really good shooters. Sanan and Dylan Darling, I don't know if they're going to start or not. I guess we'll see. 2 pretty good to really good shooters. It kind of depends. I'm not totally sold on Darling's scaling up necessarily. But it's a weird fit where you've got all that. Okay, that's fine. And you got Ejiofor at the 5. That's fine. We're happy with Zuby. How do you play Dylan Mitchell and Bryce Hopkins together for any stretch of time? It fixes defense. Certainly, I love Dylan Mitchell as a defender. But I feel like we're on, and I know this is only his 4th season, but it feels like we're on spiritually year 9 of Dylan Mitchell trying to add a jumper, and it hasn't happened. Zuby will try shots. Not really his thing. He will try jumpers. I don't suggest that he should, though. So your best 5 is going to have 2 largely non-shooters, which is kind of the same issue you had last year, except with probably 3. And I don't think you can bench Mitchell for very long, or Zuby, because they're both that good defensively and will tie things together quite well in the front court. So I don't know that you can do that, and I don't know that Hopkins really wants to play the 3. So it's largely, there's a lot of good talent here, and I think it makes sense for what Rick generally tries to do. But by the same token, I do have some fears of like is this team going to just take a bunch of mid-range jumpers again, which was not fun to watch at all in that Arkansas fixture? And what happens when you can't rely on rebounding and scrambling quite as much as they did last year? It's a roster that I think is like quite good. I would still put this no worse than like 12th nationally. Yeah. But I struggle when I see, because I've seen this a couple different places, them in like the top 2. I can't quite get there.
No. I mean, top 10, I would say. I think a lot hinges on Hopkins because he's been gone for so long, like from the college basketball consciousness. I think people forget that early in his career, sophomore, junior year, he was like a 40% three-point shooter, like 36%, something like that. He is a multi-dimensional, very talented player that has not shown it for 2 years, mostly because of injuries, maybe because of some other stuff. But he's a really good player. And I think this is his last year of eligibility, and there's a decent chance Pitino puts the fire in him where it's like, hey man, you want to be a pro or you just want to hang out, make NIL money. I think that's what it hinges on for me is the Hopkins thing. Because if he's a good shooter again, and he has shown a little bit in his past, he's a 3, he's a 4, he could potentially guard 5s. Like he has a lot of like flexibility defensively. There's a lot there, and I think there's a reason why Pitino tapped him up to come to St. John's, and I think that's where their season hinges is like, is this guy as good as I think he is, and as good as I think Pitino's going to make him? Maybe not. We'll see. But that's the case for them to be beyond top 10 and like top level.
Actually, it hinges actually a hair further for me even because there is the case to be made, and I understand he said like Ian Jackson is his point guard. There's the case to be made that if Hopkins is 2022 Hopkins again, he can be point forward and run the offense. Because when he was healthy last year, that's exactly what he did for Providence, not coincidentally, when they looked their best. Yeah. So for a roster
that 8 games last year,
I think like 3. He was barely out there.
Yeah.
But they beat BYU in one of them. And I mean, if you can kind of have him run the offense, that takes away from the fear I have, which is that you're going to have to pivot to point guard Dylan Darling by midseason, Idaho State transfer. And could that work out brilliantly? Of course. I don't think Pitino takes guys for no reason. But I also think scaling up from the Big Sky to the Pitino system can be troublesome for an undersized guard.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Next roster. I was going to say NC State, but everyone loves NC State's roster. They're good. Like, they're going to be really good. Let's just name check them. NC State, Will Wade, you're doing great.
Yeah, I'm shocked they're not in everybody's top 25.
They're not?
No, I've only seen them in like 2 of 7.
They should be top 10.
I would have them in a top 20 at least.
Oh, I think they're like one of the 10 best rosters in the country. Like, I don't. Yeah.
It might take them a little while to gel, but like by the end of the year, certainly I can see it.
Yeah.
I've been shocked that they haven't, maybe it's the name or something. I don't know. But yeah.
I think the most interesting thing to me about NC State next year is not their talent. It's just Will Wade as a coach. I remember watching his LSU teams, as I'm sure you do, and they were very talented, but completely from not every year. There was a couple years where they locked in on defense, but there were a couple years where they were extremely talented and just totally defense optional. You know what I mean? Like
Cam Thomas here especially was that way.
They just balled on people, but they did not guard at all. They were like 192nd in defense, like adjusted defensive efficiency, both of those years, whatever. So that's what I'm interested to see, because I do think he kind of like retired to McNeese and like got in the lab a little bit, and he, the junk defense they played against Clemson was interesting. I think he's maybe progressed as an actual sort of tactician a little bit. And so I'm interested to see that, because they're going to be good. Obviously, they're super talented. The fact that they got Darian Williams is like crazy. And if I was Kansas, I'd be so furious that Will Wade came in and took Darian Williams away from me, which brings up the next roster I want to talk about, because I'm a little curious about the trajectory of Kansas right now, similar to Tony Bennett. Bill Self, throughout his career, thrived on developing guys you would never think would be all American college players. Frank Mason, like go down the line. He's now at the point, much like Tony Bennett was, where you have to get these guys to be good year one, or they're going to transfer. And you're bringing in transfers and trying that, like, you need them to be good year one. Like, look at Bill Self's his history in the NCAA tournament and his history at Ken Palm. It is peerless up until the past 2 years. The past 2 years are the first 2 years where it's like, And so I'm very curious about this Kansas roster and what you make of it.
I'm in the same headspace as you, largely because if Darren Peterson is not like number one draft pick level awesome from day one, who is going to score? And I know people will rush to be like, oh, it'll be Melvin Council or Jane Dawson or Trey White. Okay, maybe. But can those guys score every night? Is Badunga going to take a huge second-year leap? Like, totally plausible.
He could. He could.
Yeah, and like, he could be
guy.
awesome. Bryson Tiller could be awesome. We do forget that, like, Elmarco Jackson figured it out a little bit prior to his injury. So I could see that being a good thing. And it always does seem like throughout the years, not this past year or two, but throughout the years, Self always finds like a random role guy who I just don't think much about in the preseason, but ends up being like their fourth leading scorer somehow. So Cole Rosario, come on down for that one. But I look at this roster, I'm stammering because I feel like I'm looking at Kansas for the third year in a row and just saying, are you aware of like where basketball's heading? Like, Peterson is a great shooter. Dawson is a good one. And statistically speaking, that completes your list of good shooters on this roster. Like Melvin Council, 29.9% from three last year. Trey White, 32. Elmarco, 27 in his last full season. Jamari McDowell, 28 in his last full season. There's not much shooting here. And while I love Badunga as a 5, and Peterson has actually been like pretty solid defensively from what we've seen. Jackson also figured it out defensively down the line of his first year. I think they're going to be fine defensively, but it feels like a repeat of the last couple where if we get to March and this team is like a 5 or a 6 seed, I don't think I'm going to be the least bit surprised. I was at least a little surprised the last 2 years because with Hunter Dickinson, you could point to, okay, maybe this guy, is frustrated to watch, doesn't always show up the best, but like when he does, he's a clear top 5 or 10 player in the game. Like, he can take over when he's able to. But it does feel to me like, for one, Darian Williams really would have helped out a lot here. But just having another obvious plus shooter off the bench, like, would have been nice. Like, where is Diggy Coit on this roster? Like, if only Zeke Mayo had an additional year, for example. They just needed, like, that 1 or 2 extra shooters to fix this. And I'm with you. It's starting to feel a little bit like the sunsetting of an era.
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at Kansas's teams over the last 5 years. One of them won the national title. And the one that won the national title shot 36% from 3 and had Ochai, Christian Braun, and Jalen Wilson as the wings. David McCormick as a center and DeJuan Harris as a point guard. That's a point guard that can't shoot and a true center and 3 guys who can bury him, right? Like, that's a team. They had Remy Martin off the bench and blah, blah, blah. Like, but those were the 3 guys who won them the national title, particularly Brown and Ochai. You look at their rosters since then, and it's almost like Bill Self has gone to, like, not 1999, like 2012, where, actually, that didn't matter. And I remember sitting there watching the teams being like, you cannot guard these guys. McCormick is going to score an easy bucket or you're going to double him, and Ochai and Brown are going to destroy you. Like, that's it. And they have not had that. And I think he tried to recreate that with Dickinson, but the people around Dickinson, KJ Adams can't shoot. Harris can't shoot. And those were the 3 guys who have been the 3 fixtures of Kansas basketball for the last, 2 years. And it's just been a non-shooting team. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in an era where teams that can shoot and space the floor and are playing like way more modern styles of basketball succeeded, and they've been like a 6 and a 7 seed. And I think he has traditionally been, if you go back and look, like from the earliest days of Bill Self at Kansas, even to Illinois, he's traditionally been sort of a Roy Williams acolyte in terms of, I don't think the 3-point line is that big of a deal. Like we'll score either way. That's fine, but it's 2025 now. And everybody is like, you got, like we talked about earlier, BYU. Alabama is obviously a great case. Everybody is looking for guys who can space the floor. Louisville has multiple people who are going to shoot the ball from like 30 feet this year. I just don't think you can win in this era without 2 or 3 guys like that. And I think whether he stumbled on it or not, he had that and then went away from it.
Yeah, and this is not to say that they're going to be like outright bad by any means. But
oh no, they'll be fine.
I don't think they're going to be a good shooting team. And the more I've looked at it while we've been talking, I don't think they're going to fix the huge issue they had last year, which is that they couldn't get to the free throw line and they really weren't very good at rebounding. We could all look really foolish. And I did make a side bet with our buddy John Fendler last summer, where last year's Kansas team would be a little poor, but this year's Kansas team, the post-hype team, was going to be the one that exceeded expectations and was like 9th best. But looking at the roster, like I can't actually get there.
I don't want to say end of an era because this is one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, right? Mm-hmm. Having grown up in the business, like writing about the Big 12 every year, and it's just like, oh yeah, Kansas won it again, Kansas won it again. Kelvin came in the last 2 years and snatched that. Like yeah. he I mean,
not only Kelvin, but Grant McCaslin and Texas Tech have stolen their thunder quite well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And this is 100% the type of thing that you say before Kansas wins the Big 12 again and Bill Self tells me to go F myself. But this is, you're kind of looking at it being like, hey man, this might be time to like negotiate anyway. All right, next roster. Illinois, we already talked about. I want to get your thoughts on Louisville because I haven't really written about Louisville. I just think they're super interesting. I think Isaac McNeely is like the most underrated college basketball player in the country. Having watched him play, and for people who don't know, when I was at The Athletic, I covered Virginia kind of tangentially because I live close to them, and that was the same year that they won the national title. So I've kind of kept an eye on them and covered them here and there. And watching them last year and even the year before, talk about a good player on a bad team. Guy hit like 42% of 250 threes. I'm very interested to see how he plays on a team where there are other players that are actually good at basketball.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's going to be interesting because when I first looked at the roster and they first got McNeely, my thought was, okay, they have the Rain Smith replacement. Because that was the initial role where, okay, McNeely can bomb 323-point attempts this year, make 120, 130, possibly lead the nation in made threes.
There's a very good chance he'll lead the nation in made threes.
Yeah, and he may yet still do that. I wonder, did they maybe overdo it a hair by adding Ryan Condell too, like too much of a good thing? Because they are somewhat similar players. They both take a ton of threes. They both make a ton. You can say, like, there's never too much of a good thing, but they do basically play the same position. And I worry about one kind of usurping from the other. And that's not to mention Adrian Woolley, probably just chilling on the bench during that time, who's also a great shooter. But no, man, I love this roster. I think they're going to be a top 5 offense. I would have them there. I haven't really figured out my top 25 yet because I don't write for ESPN. But roster ranking wise, I think it would be really hard to have them lower than like what, 5th, 6th. Even though I have I'm having a hard time being convinced by them defensively. They're going to be just so good and so powerful in offense that what it's going to look like is one of the peak Nate Oates teams. They might not get a ton of stops. Like when I look at the roster in full transparency, I'm like, man, Javon Hadley's going to have to do a lot of work on the wing in stopping drives to the basket because Frew, we'll see how he translates. I don't feel great about that. And I definitely don't love Ali Khalifa off of a surgery potentially being the other rim protector either. But by the same token, they're going to score so much it may not matter.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the job Pat Kelsey did last year, you just look at where Louisville was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Dead, complete non-entity as a program. Totally turned them around. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he builds on. Oh yeah, we bought 13 transfers in and we figured it out and we had a pretty good basketball team. Now to the next step of like consistently sustaining it. Okay, next roster that I'm interested in talking about. Talk to me about Yukon. What do you think?
I think there's a certain level of just assume they're going to be good until otherwise noted. And I am well aware they finished like, what was it, 32nd or so in KenPom last year? Something in that range. They were not very good.
You nailed
honestly.
it. 32nd. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was hopeful I was right. It feels good to be right sometimes. But I like the build here because you have 3 real plus shooters. And I know Caravan shot 34.7% from 3 last year. That's a real outlier compared to the rest of his college career and like what we know from him prior to college. I like that. Jalen Stewart, I wouldn't be surprised to see take a big leap this year. But really, they've just built this in a wise way where you have a lot of plus shooting. You've got Braylon Mullins coming in, and Hurley has been really good at integrating 5-star freshmen into his lineup however he wants to. Terrace Reed could be a walking double-double. I am consistently amazed at how much better he looks with Yukon than he did with Michigan. And that's, not to overlook, like, one of my favorite key transfers here that I haven't really heard a lot about because Demery has taken up a lot of, words there, is Malachi Smith from Dayton. He's not flashy. He won't score a bunch, but he was a terrific perimeter defender, really good passer, very solid shooter for what he was asked to do. I would not be shocked at all if he takes on a significantly larger role than people anticipate as the 6th man. If he turns out plus, if you get more from Jaden Ross, honestly, if Jacob Furphy ends up being a bit better than expected, which I'm gathering is like potentially more likely than I thought.
Is that the same Furphy as the Kansas Furphy?
I hope so, but I don't know offhand.
Who's balling out in Summer League?
But supposedly he's been very, very good early on. And when I look at this Yukon team, I see them 10th at Torvik, and I honestly think it's fair. I think of them as no worse than a top 15 team nationally, a team that's going to be really tough to beat basically all year long. I like the way they've built this. They're going to be awesome offensively again. That I will say, and I'm curious if you think the same, defensively, I am yet to be convinced of Reed. I think that he is a fine rim protector. I think that he is way too prone to fouling to get to being a great rim protector.
Yeah, he's also just not like, how to say this? He's not like a guy who, okay, you throw the ball in the post and you immediately have to get rid of it because he's just like, you don't throw the ball against him. Like he can be got at a little bit, which is part of the reason why they didn't have, look, like 2 years ago they had Donovan Clingan. You just don't enter the ball into the post against that guy, like ever in college basketball. In the pros maybe you do, but in college basketball you definitely don't. Obviously Terrace Reed is not there, but I don't know. I mean, maybe he gets there. Like they've had a summer of Dan Hurley screaming at them, so he might get there. I don't know.
Yeah, and my one fear with them is like, who is going to be their lead guy? And I think there's no bad thing about having 3 roughly equal options. And this is both statistically in that, Demery, Ball, and Caravan all averaged between 13.5 and 14.4 last year, and all took roughly the same shots per game. And that's without adding Mullins into the mix or Malachi Smith or Reed or whoever. I thought last year Ball was kind of the guy who took the quote-unquote clutch shots, but you also had McNeely there to take some off of him as well. Is Ball going to be that guy and take the extra leap? Is Caravan going to usurp more usage in his super senior year? What about Demery? What about Mullins? That's a fun one to work out, though. That's one where you can say, okay, we have 4 really good options down the stretch of any game, and we're just going to play it by ear. And that's probably going to work out just fine for them.
Yeah, and traditionally it would be Caravan, but he is probably at his best as like a 3rd or 4th option, the way he was in the title years. He's not like a ball handler. He's not going to initiate offense really meaningfully. But you also, at this stage in his career, don't want him just like standing around in the corner waiting to get the ball handed to him. So, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see. We'll see with Yukon. All right, let's do two more. Let's do Gonzaga. Graham Ike is back. Adam Miller's there. They've got a lot of international players that my subscribers on Substack in our live chat continue to tell me about. They're very excited about them. I am curious about Gonzaga at this stage. This is a little bit the same as the Bill Self conversation. You peak a certain point in a coach's career. Let us not forget Mark Few had Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren in his front court. Didn't quite get there. Didn't get the national title. Frankly, among coaches has been the most like, I'd love to win a national title. That's why I do what I do. But I'm not like gonna, kill myself if I never win it. Like, it's fine. But you do feel them sort of maybe taking a step back away from like, oh, this is the number. Like, you go back and look at their KenPom preseason rankings, postseason rankings. There was like a 5-year stretch there where they were top 5 every year. And they're not maybe quite there right now.
Yeah, man, I like what Gonzaga has done. I remain really confused about Tyon Grant Foster. I'm never quite sure of how much I like him or don't like him. But getting Braden Smith this year is going to be really nice. And as you said, the combo of VK and Huff, that's a pretty stout combo in your offensive front court. But I'm with you a bit of, I think Gonzaga is taking a step back from title contention. I don't think they're taking a step back from Sweet 16 contention by any means. Defensively, it's going to be the exact same issue it's been the last 2 seasons, which is that with Ike, you have a guy who can keep somebody in front of him but cannot quite vertically contest the way you would want him to. And the options that they've had in previous years that could potentially do that, you didn't want to play them over Ike because you've promised Ike all of this playing time to begin with, and that's why he's there. They ran into that issue pretty severely down the stretch of last season. I cannot recall the player's name off the top of my head, but they played a guy late in West Coast Conference play out of desperation. He was incredible as a shot blocker, and they couldn't go back to him because they were already packed at center. But that being said, I still think they're going to be quite good offensively. Ike gets his. Huff, I don't understand why more people aren't in on Huff. I like that guy a lot. Braden Smith, still Venters, let's not forget, comes back this year.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed. But I'm with you a bit of like, I don't think that they're going to contend for the title this year. And that's okay. But right, I do think...
But if you're in the Sweet 16,
yeah, like
you don't know what's going to happen. Like,
and if they're a 4 seed and they're in the Sweet 16, like, shit, we've seen a 4 seed win it.
100%.
Why not?
You just got to be, as John Calipari famously said, you just got to be up to bat every year. And Gonzaga's up to bat every year. Okay, last one, Illinois. I love Illinois because, as I wrote like a month ago, Brad Underwood is, whether intentionally or not, trying to recreate like a Gen Z version of the Yugoslavia like 1980 team. Like, he is just all in on Eastern Europeans. He's got 2 Ivisiches. He's got Peja Stojakovic's kid. He's got a Mirkovic on the team. He's got Mihailo Petrovic on the team. Tell me about Illinois.
Well, they're going to be awesome. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. The aspect I haven't heard as many people talk about just yet is how good I think they're going to be defensively. Like, the Ivisic combo, and I'm well aware that like Big Z has serious limitations as a player. He's never going to be the player that a lot of people thought he would be based on, oh God, what was it, 16 minutes against Georgia in that one game where he looked like Jokic Jr.? Yeah. But like, he's good. I genuinely think that Big Z is a good basketball player. He is a value-added guy who can give you good shooting, who can like at least stand in front of a driver. I don't think he can test very well. But Tomislav is excellent. Getting Boswell back is wonderful too. Like, that guy is so much fun. I like the way they do this just because they found their niche. And I think that's a key thing for any program who's not, let's say you're a program that's not spent $14 million on your roster, or perhaps
I was going to say, be careful. Illinois fans are going to be mad if you denigrate their one Final Four banner that they have hanging in the rafters. They're going to be mad.
Hey man, at least that team was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So they've got that. That team ruled at age 12 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Really doxing myself there. But Stojakovic, I like a lot. Stojakovic is the problem I can see here is like maybe I'm too rosy on the defense. Like maybe the Ivicic combo doesn't work out as well as I can't think it will. Maybe Boswell's asked to do too much. Maybe they have to play Ben Hummerkaus a little too often. But the thing is, I look at their roster and I genuinely cannot point out a negative defender. And I think a lot of people would be like, well, wait, what about Big Z? Big Z is perfectly fine. Just like guarding a certain zone, staying in it. And like, if that's all you ask him to do, it's not going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
He can
People
extend
forget
out to,
you can just play zone. Like,
yeah, well,
it's
he can
fine.
extend out to the perimeter because he's long as hell
Yeah.
and like can affect shots. Hummerkaus is not nearly as bad a defender as people think. Same with Ty Rogers. I really like their build. I won't be shocked at all if Illinois is like a 1 or 2 seed this year.
Yeah.
And I definitely will not be shocked if they win the Big Ten.
I mean, I think they're the Big Ten favorite to me.
See, I'm still taking Purdue. I'm still taking Purdue number 1 in that league, but Illinois is going to make it a lot more competitive than you might have expected.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Purdue's good. I spoke too soon. Purdue's going to be good. All right.
Purdue's flying under the radar just because they haven't added much in the way of the portal.
Yeah, they're doing what they're doing. They are a great example. They're like Marquette, but like they're like Marquette on steroids right now because they have really good players coming back. Whereas Marquette, Shaka has gone all in on like, we're not taking transfers and we're locked in on you guys, but came to the end of a cycle with a couple of pros and now has to like rebuild in that same like mindset of, hey, we're not taking guys. We're supporting you. We're with you. Whereas Purdue is just like, yes, we're doing that, but we're also going to be extremely good. Meanwhile, Matt Painter is searching in like the hills of Mongolia for the next 7'6" guy he can find.
Oh man, Marquette. They're building like it's 2018.
Yeah, they are, but that's fine.
That's totally fine. Like I'm happy that there's a diversity in thought as it pertains to roster building. But if you're going to do that, you got to be prepared for the inevitable gap year.
Exactly. That's where they are.
It's like backpacking in Europe. They're backpacking in Europe this season.
Yeah, they are 100% having a gap year. Maybe not though. Maybe they'll be really good. I don't know. It's mid-July. We don't know anything. They might go to the Final Four. We don't know. Anyway, all right. That's the podcast. Will Warren, great guest. We're going to do this a lot. So thank you for your inaugural visit. It's the Basket Under Review podcast. Yeah, we're done now. Thank you, Will.
Thanks for having me on.